Religious leaders, government representatives, community members gathered at the Thembalethu in George in the Western Cape province to sign a pledge against gender-based violence. The men held a conference about the social ills that led to GBV and the role that they can play to address the scourge. So on this, we're going to be joined via Zoom by Dr. Lesley and Foster, Executive Director of the Masimanyane Women's Support Centre, to weigh in on this initiative by various stakeholders, perhaps in a bid to end gender-based violence. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Foster. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you and to all the listeners. Thank you for having me.
I just want to look at the strides that have been taken and the unified voice that some stakeholders in society are aiming to work together, perhaps to ensure that we fight against the scourge of GBVF. What are your thoughts on the progress to date? Are you satisfied with the outcomes?
Satisfied? Absolutely not. While we continue to have high levels of rape and femicide, we cannot be satisfied. We cannot be satisfied until every woman and girl is safe in her family, her home, and her community. And at the moment, that is not happening. It was interesting to hear about the pledge that men are signing, to say that they want to put an end to violence against women. But I think working on the two summits that we've had on gender-based violence, being part of the team that has worked on the reports that have come out of those summits, we are very clear that the real driver of gender-based violence is inequality, and it is toxic masculinities, which gives rise to negative norms, behaviors and attitudes towards women and girls. Those are the key drivers. Signing a pledge is a commitment on paper, but it is not substantive reality, and it's not substantive equality. The main issue we need to be dealing with is how do we address the inequality in our society where women have such low status, where their lives are not valued, they are dispensable to some of the men. And I must emphasize that, of course, it's not all our men across the country, but there are too many men who feel that they own women's bodies if they're in a relationship with them, or if those women end relationships with them. And then they feel that they can dispense of those women, and just take their lives away. So there's a lot of work that has to be done by men. But what I think is lacking, and what we have seen is lacking in the country, is that the work that is being done with men is not about dismantling toxic masculinities, but finding ways to what they call empower women. And we are very strongly of the view that, yes, the work with men has to happen, but that work has to be about how to change that toxicity within society. And to equal the society so that men do not feel that they should have power and control over women's lives, over women's bodies, and their well-being. And those are the difficult questions that we have to really grapple with. So the unfortunate thing is that cultural, religious, traditional institutions are based on patriarchal power. And the big question is, are they willing to give up that power? Are they willing to give women the equal space, the equal recognition, the equal power? And I think we're still grappling with that. I don't think there is even enough of an analysis as to how we dismantle toxic masculinities and how we work with that. Most of the work done by men in this country focus on women, but they don't center women's experiences in that. They don't focus the work on changing masculinities. They talk about women's empowerment. The work with men has to be done by men. We are not going into that space because it's not our space to work in. As women's rights activists, we focus on developing women's agency. We say we need to have women feel confident, to be safe in their societies, and to be able to live their lives the way they want to and should be able to do. So within a human rights context, equality means not just, equality on paper, but substantive equality, real equality. You have to see that change happening. That transformation is not happening yet. The exciting thing is we have a national strategic plan on gender-based violence. We have very strong political commitment at the moment from the president and from parliament. And what we need now is for us to follow through on that. But marches, lighting candles, having awareness raising programs have failed us as a country. We now have to sit down and do the serious work of saying, how do we change the social norms that are so destructive to women and children, and that are causing them harm and causing them death in too many cases in our country.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dr. Lesley and Foster, because, you know, some of the view or some are questioning whether we are just rearranging the chairs on the decks of the Titanic in relation to the action that we're seeing beyond the pledges, which is a commitment on paper that you rightfully mentioned. And you've touched on a few pertinent points, but because of the interest of time, I just want to also look at the solutions going forward and just bring one element into the fore, because there are obviously different scenarios unfolding in public and private spheres. And so how can we begin to look at the role of traditional leaders in fighting GBF as well? Because there needs to be a re-socializing of ideas of masculinity in relation to boys and men at large, or perhaps how they identify in terms of sexual orientation and gender, and really the narratives around that, because the images that they hold about women, you know, how is that also playing a role? What do men then also think of women, and really why it matters at this point, given how it's driving their actions? So how would you respond to those sentiments or questions also coming to the fore?
Look, I think, first of all, the traditional cultural and religious institutions are very powerful institutions because they have, you know, huge audiences, huge numbers of people that they work with. So that is an opportunity. I think what's needed now is to have the hard conversations about how you shift toxic masculinity. How do you change men from, feeling that women are inferior? And how do we change that at a family level, a community level, and a societal level? That's what the NSP has worked to unpack. We talk about moral regeneration, and that's really some of the human rights elements that we want to bring into the work that we're doing now. And I think it's important that men sit down and have those conversations. There are some very encouraging programs that are taking place across the world, you know, to change that kind of masculine identity of the man having to have power, having to have control. Because in societies where they share power and control, you see that they advance at a greater pace. And you see, you know, that people are happier, the well-being, the economic improvement of families like that is so much better. So it's learning to accord dignity to every human being, which is a basic human right, to have respect for everyone. And we need to deal with our historical past. So one of the things that we are stuck with, and we're not dealing with it adequately enough, is all the mental anxiety and stress that exists as a result of colonization and apartheid. And we've imported those violent, toxic, negative norms and standards into our society. We need to unpack that and to discard that, and to work with men and boys. So with the work with boys has to start at a very young level, where you start to teach that. And I've seen some amazing programs in Japan, for instance, where they teach how to respect the elderly, how to respect people with disabilities, how to respect LGBTQI persons, how to respect women and girls. And that's the kind of programs we need to start instilling from a very young age, preschool age, into our children. And I want to say something here. The media plays a very big role, and particularly social media now, in perpetuating stereotypes of women, you know, as being weak, as being vulnerable, as being assigned only to very lowly kinds of responsibilities. And our society's changed. We see young women rising up and, you know, really doing amazing things. And when you bring all the creativity and the innovation from all of society together, you have much more powerful society. And I think that's how we will end violence against women. The media needs to be reformed as well and not show women in these negative lights.
Absolutely. Talk is cheap at this point, and we're obviously demanding action. Thank you for your sentiments and for your time on the SABC, Dr. Lesley Ann Foster. She is the Executive Director of the Masimanyane Women's Support Center, weighing in on some of the initiatives to address the scourge of GBV, the multilateral approaches around the world, but also in relation to South Africa and really how we're faring at this point. Thank you to her for joining us on that chat.